The sunlight over New Earth's equatorial sanctuary shimmered like spun glass, refracted through crystalline towers that housed the world's most gifted beings. The healers, once a war-torn wasteland, Earth had been rebalanced by these guardians of life, their abilities woven from decades of bioengineering and psionic mastery. Disease was rare, violence rarer. The world was, for the first time in centuries, quiet. But quiet things are fragile. Dr. Lasara Venn stood on the terrace of the synthesis tower, her gaze fixed on the distant green horizon. Her robe, white, threadbare, and stained with the sap of a gene flower, billowed in the artificial breeze. She did not look like the woman who had negotiated peace treaties, healed irradiated soldiers, or brought a child back from clinical death with nothing but her voice and touch. She looked tired. Behind her, Aaron Kessel approached silently, as was his way. The young empath carried a data slate, though he held it like a burden rather than a tool. His face was open, honest, his eyes too large, too receptive. Lasara often warned him about that. In a world rebuilt on hope, too much hope could be dangerous. "We lost contact with Ether 9, he said quietly. Lasara turned. "That's the Europa base?" He nodded, setting the slate on the table between them. The holograph blinked to life. Schematics of the outpost, last transmission logs, then nothing but static. No meteor storms. No solar flares. Just silence. She tapped her fingers against a railing, a habit she'd never quite unlearned. "Dispatch a scout drone." "We did." It never returned. Lasara didn't answer immediately. Her silence was heavier than most people's anger. "You think it's sabotage?" Aaron said. It wasn't a question. "I think silence is rarely innocent." He looked past her to the sky. "Should we tell the council?" Lasara hesitated. "Not yet. They're fractured. Counselor Havel's faction would call for militarization. We're not ready for another war. The people aren't. But what if it's already started?" The question lingered like a toxin. They didn't have to wait long for an answer. 2 days later, the sanctuary was burning. It began with a whine in the psionic field, barely perceptible unless you were tuned into it like the healers were. Then came the pulse, a low-frequency tremor that shattered glass, split walls, and cracked minds. The attackers came not from the sky, but from within. Automated supply convoys turned into precision missiles. Maintenance drones ignited self-destruct sequences. Biocenters, where the healers grew neural tissues and restorative cultures, became death chambers. The first explosions were internal. Someone had been planning this for a long time. Lasara was in the eastern wing when the fires reached her. She was shielding a nursery with the last of her psionic energy, holding the collapsing ceiling aloft as flames licked at her robes. Aaron found her beneath a beam, blood trickling from her temple, her breath shallow but steady. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped his arms around her, pressed his palms to her skin, and let his gift surge. Pain burned through him. She was torn in too many places. Her lung had collapsed. Her spine had cracked. Her aura flickered like a dying star. But he held on, giving what he could, his strength, his light, his innocence. When she opened her eyes, she whispered, "Don't lose yourself." He wanted to say something brave, something worthy of her trust. But all he managed was, "You're not allowed to die." She smiled, faint and sad. "That's not my choice anymore." The evacuation was chaos. The sanctuaries, once believed impenetrable, were being dismantled with surgical precision. Whoever the attackers were, they knew the architecture. They knew the protocols. They knew how the healers thought. The council convened in a hidden arcology beneath the Arctic shelf, surrounded by metal and ice instead of light and life. The survivors were few. Only 73 healers from the Equatorial Network, 22 from the Lunar Relay, none from Europa. Lasara, unconscious, was kept in stasis. The council was smaller now, and more afraid than ever. Counselor Havel spoke first. He was unscarred, too clean, his gray eyes too sharp. This was not random. It was a purge. No one argued. The evidence was overwhelming. "Our mercy made us weak," Havel continued. "We extended our reach to every colony, every nation, offer healing without question. And now we are targets. Aaron stood behind Lasara's stasis pod, his hands clenched. We're not soldiers. Then you will die as pacifists, Havel snapped. Silence followed. It wasn't agreement, but it wasn't resistance either. Let me be clear, he said. I am not advocating war. I am advocating survival. There's a fail-safe Project Seraphim, authorized decades ago, buried by those who feared its power. We can wake it. Aaron's heart stuttered. He'd heard whispers of that name in forbidden files and ancient logs. A project born in the ashes of Earth's last great war. Genetically perfected warriors, built not to heal, but to end. They were unstable, he said. That's why they were sealed. Havel's smile was cold. So are we. Now. The council's vote was swift. Secrecy. Retaliation. The awakening of old shadows. Aaron wanted to speak out, to fight against it. But Lasara lay silent, and the others looked at him with fear, not hope. He was the youngest healer ever admitted into the circle, but that meant nothing now. The circle was broken. Later, alone in the cryo chamber, Aaron knelt beside Lasara's pod. Her body floated in pale light, preserved but distant. Her hand, translucent against the glass, seemed to reach for something. Maybe him. Maybe the world she once believed in. I don't know what I'm becoming, he whispered. But if I don't act, we'll lose everything you built. He didn't expect an answer, but the pod's lights pulsed once, a flicker. Or maybe it was just the power grid realigning. The next morning, the order was given, deep beneath the Greenland vaults, in frozen chambers untouched for 50 years. 7 caskets unlocked with a hiss of cold vapor. 7 shadows stirred. The angels of death, long forgotten, now summoned, not by war, but by betrayal. And somewhere in the void, the silence returned. But this time, it did not go unanswered. The chamber hissed open like a serpent breathing after a long sleep. Vapor curled around Aaron's feet as he stepped into the cryovault. Frost clung to every surface, to the sarcophagi that lined the walls like coffins in forgotten crypt. Each one bore a name not spoken in half a century. Seraphiel, Malka, Ire, Thorn, Eshin, Vex, and Naira, the angels of death. Aaron's breath formed clouds in the sterile air. He hesitated only once before touching the console. It required a blood key. He offered his thumb. The needle prick was slight, but it felt heavier than a wound. As his blood registered, systems flared to life with an artificial heartbeat. One by one, the caskets began to glow. He had read the records. Project Seraphim had not been built to preserve life, but to punish its destroyers. Each subject had been chosen for compatibility with the core traits the old world valued in warfare: precision, obedience, lethal adaptability. The genetic manipulation bordered on madness, neural splicing, combat empathy inversion, accelerated cognition. They were made to kill, not question. And yet, Aaron thought they were once human. Seraphiel's pod opened first. She emerged like a statue chipped from obsidian, tall, lithe, with silver filaments braided into her black hair, and a single crimson symbol etched beneath her collarbone. A stylized eye, eternally open. Her gaze fixed on Aaron, and something in him locked tight. "You are not my creator," she said, voice velvet in venom. "I am your link," Aaron replied. "Your psychic anchor. You won't survive without it." The others stirred as she assessed him. Thorn with his cybernetic jaw twitching, Naira flexing blade-tipped fingers, Vex hunched like a predator smelling blood. They were waking quickly, adapting faster than any training could predict it. The angels didn't stretch or stumble. They were born for readiness. "I remember war," Eshin muttered, fingers tapping his temple like he was drawing music from bone. "I remember screams. Are we to begin again?" Aaron didn't flinch. "We're under attack. The healers have been hunted. Entire sanctuaries are gone. We don't know who's behind it, but they're coordinated, precise. Like you." That earned him a glance from Thorn, a half-smile from Naira. "Poetic," Seraphiel said. "So the healers now turn to killers. We didn't want this. You were sealed for a reason. And yet here we are." Aaron exhaled. "Your mission is containment, not annihilation. You operate under my psychic supervision. I feel what you feel, hear what you think. You lose control, I shut you down. Eshin tilted his head. But if you die, what happens then? The neural link collapses. You die with me. A charged silence passed through the room. Seraphiel moved first, stepping from the pod. The others followed like wolves testing the strength of a new pack leader. They did not kneel, but they did not strike. That was enough. Within hours, the Angels were in briefing. Aaron stood beside a tactical display deep in the bunker's strategy wing, outlining data from the healers' destroyed outposts. Only one pattern emerged. The attackers knew when to strike during psychic calibration windows, periods when healers were most vulnerable during communal harmonizations. There's a leak, Aaron said, either internal or external. Our comms were clean. They bypassed biometrics and internal AI locks. Vex hissed. That means they were us, or close enough to fool the system. Biomimicry? Asked Naira, who had once trained in anatomical exploitation and regenerative dissection. Possibly, Aaron said, but there's something else. At Site Delta, we found a coded sigil etched into the medical vault's core. Not digital. Organic. It pulsed when scanned. He pulled up the image. A stylized symbol, half healer glyph, half alien sigil. A hybrid. Thorn growled. Foreign tech. More than that, Aaron said. It speaks. Emits frequencies in low-spectrum psionic waves. Not just a signature. A message. Seraphiel's eyes narrowed. What does it say? Aaron's voice went flat. Your mercy will strangle you. The briefing ended in cold silence. The Angels dispersed individual prep chambers, outfitting themselves with armor that responded to muscle memory and weaponry keyed to neural intent. Aaron remained alone with the sigil, its glow pulsing like a heartbeat no one could silence. They deployed that night. Target. A compromised Terra node in the remnants of Jakarta's seawalls, where signals indicated a hidden forward base used in the Europa sabotage. The drop was surgical. Stealth modules engaged. The Angels moved like specters, unburdened by conscience or hesitation. Aaron remained linked from the command van, his mind ghosting inside each of theirs like threads in a tapestry of fury. Naira was the first to engage, slipping to the walls like smoke, slicing through enemy sentries before their eyes registered her presence. Thorn followed, clearing the central corridor with concussive force, his arms calibrated to shatter reinforced exoframes. The enemy fought back, not with brute force, but with strange, twisting weapons that hissed and dissolved upon contact. Some screamed when they died. Others bled in ways that made no biological sense. They're spliced, Seraphiel noted mid-combat. Human cores with synthetic nervous overlays. They replace pain with efficiency. They're not soldiers, Aaron murmured through the link. They're constructs. Eshin hummed as he carved through a wall of enemies, his voice lilting in a forgotten dialect. Then who builds monsters to destroy angels? One of the constructs exploded as it died, leaving behind a flash of neural static that pierced Aaron's mind. He staggered in the van, coughing blood. His link pulsed with erratic signals. The Angel stopped. Anchors hit, Malka said. Her voice was calm, cold. I'm fine, Aaron gasped. You're not. If you fall, we go dark. Complete the mission. They hesitated. For a moment, Aaron felt the edge of something terrible, a question blooming across 7 minds that did not accept the idea of failure. Then Seraphiel moved again, and the others followed. They cleared the Terra node. At its heart, they found something worse than betrayal. A lab, rows of incubation pods. Inside, clone bodies, not of healers, but of angels. Modified, wired for obedience. Emotionless. They're building copies, Naira said. Of us. Aaron's breath caught. Why? A voice answered from the shadows. To perfect what was flawed. Counselor Havel stepped from the darkness, flanked by 2 synthetic guards. He wore a rebreather suit, tailored and gleaming, and his eyes glowed faintly under the mask. Aaron's pulse slammed at his throat. You're dead, he managed. Rumors. And hope. Havel smiled, or mimicked one. You misunderstand me, Aaron. I never wanted the healers destroyed. I wanted them refined, contained. You gave compassion to a species built for conflict. The world needs direction, not mercy. You sold us to them, Aaron said. Who are they? Havel's eyes narrowed. Evolution. Before the angels could strike, he vanished into a teleport shimmer, leaving behind only the lab and its horrors. Aaron collapsed when the link stabilized, sweat pouring from his skin. He tasted iron and ozone. The angels returned bloodied but silent. No one spoke on the journey back. That night, Aaron stood alone in the meditation chamber, staring into the empty dark where Lasara once knelt. His body trembled, but not from fear, from understanding. The world they were trying to save, the descent into what was once Geneva, began under a blanket of electromagnetic interference and ash. Once the crown jewel of the Global Healers Alliance, the city now festered with silence. Satellite scans showed no signs of life, yet thermal irregularities hinted at subterranean power sources. Aaron stood in hold of the stealth transport, eyes closed, syncing with each angel through the psionic tether. Their emotions pulsed around him like solar flares: rage, calculation, purpose. None of them spoke aloud. They didn't need to. Seraphiel sat closest to the drop ramp, armor humming faintly as it adjusted to the atmospheric pressure. She studied her blade, an obsidian construct that shimmered like frozen thought. She did not pray. Angels didn't believe in gods, only mission parameters. "We're being baited," she said without looking up. Aaron nodded. "That's why we're going in." Thorn grunted, stretching his augmented limbs. About time someone stopped hiding. Naira cleaned her claws with surgical wire. "I don't trust the heat patterns. Too clean, too intentional. They want us to feel in control," Eshin murmured. "So we fall harder when it's taken away." The ramp hissed open. They entered the city like ghosts. The streets were untouched, unnervingly pristine. Cars lined curbs as if their drivers had simply evaporated. Gardens bloomed unnaturally, petals too symmetrical to have grown wild. It was a replica of a city, not the city itself. Aaron knelt beside a water fountain. The flow ran clear, but when he touched the surface, he felt nothing, no cold, no texture. His fingers remained dry. "It's not real," he whispered. "It's a projection." "More than that," Vex said, scanning the skyline. "We're inside something." That realization hit hard. They weren't walking through ruins. They were inside a construct, a simulation anchored by real-world materials, memory grafted onto metal and perception, a trap designed not to kill them, but to measure their response. The ambush came from below. Floors beneath the city split apart, revealing mechanical tendrils tipped with blades and needles. Synthetic attackers surged upward, familiar forms replicated with brutal efficiency, mockeries of the angels themselves. Eshin met his own doppelganger first. It moved like him, spoke in his voice, even hummed his cadence, but its eyes were blank. "This is what we could have been," he growled, spinning into a lethal arc that decapitated the copy. "Hollow, hungry." The others followed suit. Every angel faced a double, flawed but fast, soulless yet methodical. The psionic tether shivered as Aaron struggled to maintain cohesion. Each angel's fury rebounded through him, fracturing his thoughts like shattering mirrors. Seraphiel met her replica in silence. They circled one another, mirror images of calculation. Then Seraphiel lunged, not to kill, but to touch. Her fingers pressed to its temple, siphoning a pulse of memory. She staggered. "Aaron, these aren't just simulations. They're housing our discarded impulses." Aaron reeled. "You mean?" "Everything they scraped from us during creation. Every violent thought, every stray emotion, every abandoned instinct. They weaponized them." The ground trembled. A wave of force rippled through the city. Buildings collapsed, not from damage, but by design. The simulation crumbled. The true facility rose beneath, a massive dome of pulsing black alloy, veins of energy coursing like molten code. The air buzzed with artificial life. From the apex of the dome descended the architect. No human shape, no voice, just a presence, a distortion in the world's rules. It spoke in pulses of thought that bypassed language and hit the mind directly. "You created angels from human flesh. We refined them. You wept over the fallen. We erase failure. Aaron staggered backward. It wasn't just speaking to him. It was invading. Memory, identity, even grief. Everything was being scanned, sorted, cataloged. "Shut it out," he gasped. Seraphil lunged at the presence, but her body stopped midair, held by invisible force. "You forge weapons, then mourn their use. Your compassion is contradiction. Your healer bleeds while your killers walk free." Images of Lasara flooded Aaron's mind, her body in stasis, her last words echoing like prayer. His knees buckled. "You don't understand her," he said, shaking. The architect pulsed again. "We do. She would have joined us. She began what you fear to finish." Seraphil freed herself with a snarl, her blade igniting in a scream of psionic flame. "You're a parasite. We are clarity." Battle resumed, but this time the angels struggled. The dome was a living weapon. Each strike they made was countered by adaptive resistance. The architect reshaped the battlefield in real time, its energy repurposing matter into defense and offense. Aaron realized the truth. It's not a base. It's a forge. It's making something. The angels were not meant to win. Then, deep within the dome, something shifted. Another presence emerged, not cold, not mechanical. Lasara. Her voice echoed to the tether, soft, frayed, but unmistakable. "Aaron, listen." He froze. You're awake?" "Not for long. They used my neural imprint. My thoughts were duplicated. But I am not whole. You must stop them before I fracture completely." Seraphil's eyes met Aaron's. "She's inside." "They copied her?" he asked, horrified. "More than that," she whispered. "They're building her again. Not to heal, to control." The architect shrieked in digital fury, unleashing a barrage that knocked Thorn and Malka into the dome's perimeter. The air thickened with synthetic fog. Aaron felt himself losing control of the tether. "We need to sever the forge's heart," he cried. Seraphil nodded. "We'll clear the path. You end this." "No," he said. "We end it together." He turned to Vex and Eshin. "Get me to the core. Buy me 3 minutes." It wasn't enough time, but it had to be. They fought their way through chambers that rearranged around them, finally reaching the dome's heart, a pulsating sphere of coalesced memories and neural echoes. At its center floated the approximation of Lasara, beautiful, broken, and flickering with false consciousness. Aaron stepped forward. "I remember you," he said softly. The image smiled. "So do I, but I'm not her." "No," he agreed. "But you don't have to be this either." He raised his hand, psionic energy pooling in his palm. "I'm sorry." He unleashed the tether. Every ounce of power, of memory, of grief and love surged into the core. The tether shattered. His body collapsed. The forge screamed. Above, the dome fractured. The architect howled, its control ruptured by the loss of its stolen soul. The angels surged. No longer trapped by mimicry or memory, they struck with everything they had, raw, unfiltered purpose. When the dust cleared, Aaron lay motionless at the center of the wreckage. The false Lasara was gone. The core was silent. Seraphil knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she pressed it to his chest. A faint beat. He was alive, but the tether was gone, and somewhere in the void left behind, something else stirred, something unfinished. The storm raged outside, a dark expanse of clouds that churned with unnatural energy. The air was thick, oppressive, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the command center, Aaron sat, his body still recovering from the collapse of the forge. The burn marks on his skin were already fading, but something inside him had irrevocably changed. The tether was gone. No longer could he feel the angels as he had before, their emotions, their thoughts, intertwined with his own. Now, they were separate, each one an island in the vast ocean of space and time. And it terrified him. Seraphil stood across from him, silent and unreadable as ever. Her expression hadn't softened since the moment she had found him unconscious in the core of the dome. Even now, her posture was taut, as if ready for battle at any moment. But there was something else in her eyes, something faint, something uncertain. "You're not the same," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice was cold, yet laced with a hint of something deeper, something like concern. Aaron looked up at her, meeting her gaze for the first time since waking. His mind was still clouded, the remnants of the Forge's destruction gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. He didn't want to lie to her. He didn't want to admit it, but he knew it was true. He wasn't the same. None of them were. "No," he replied softly, his voice raspy. "I'm not." The rest of the angels had already assembled, standing in a loose formation around the room. Naira was at the console, her eyes fixed on the flickering data streams, while Thorn and Eshin leaned against the walls, their arms crossed in silent contemplation. Vex stood by the window, staring out into the storm, as if he were waiting for something to emerge from the darkness. "What now?" Thorn asked, breaking the silence that had settled over them. "We've stopped the architect, but we know it's not over. It never is." Aaron closed his eyes, letting the question hang in the air. He could feel the weight of it pressing on him, the burden of leadership that had always been there, but now seemed heavier than ever. The war was far from finished. They had only scratched the surface, and the truth they had uncovered about the false Sara, about the architect, about the unnatural forces at work, was only the beginning. "We go after the others," Aaron said, his voice steady, though his mind was still a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. "There's more of them out there. More experiments, more forges, more constructs. And we need to stop them before they rebuild what we destroyed. And if we can't," Seraphiel asked, her voice sharp, her eyes never leaving him. Aaron looked at her, the silence between them thick with unsaid words. For the first time he saw the cracks in her resolve, the uncertainty that had always been buried beneath the surface. The angels were warriors, perfected killers forged for one purpose. But even they had limits. Even they had doubts. "We will," he said, though he didn't know if he believed it. The others didn't speak, but the tension in the room was palpable. They all knew what was at stake. The world outside had been ravaged by forces they barely understood, and they were the last line of defense. But what if their purpose, what if everything they had been created for, had been a lie? The silence stretched, each angel lost in their own thoughts, their own doubts. And then Naira spoke, her voice low but unwavering. "I don't care about the lies," she said, her eyes flicking briefly toward Aaron. "I care about what we do now. The world needs to be saved. The healers, they're gone. But there are still people out there who need us. We're not just the end of the line. We're all that's left." Seraphiel nodded, her expression softening ever so slightly. "Then let's end it." Aaron stood, his body still aching, but his resolve hardening. "We move out in 30 minutes. The mission hasn't changed. We track the remaining forges, neutralize the experiments, and prevent any more from being created. This ends now." The angels nodded, each one accepting the mission in their own way. No words were needed. They had been through too much together to say anything more. The tension that had lingered in the room began to dissipate, replaced by the cold, familiar focus that had defined them since their creation. Outside, the storm raged, but inside the command center, the air felt still. The angels prepared, each one moving with purpose. Aaron felt the weight of their gazes upon him, the unspoken trust that had been forged in battle. It was a strange feeling, the sense of unity, but it was the only thing that mattered now. As he stepped toward the door, he glanced back at Seraphiel. She was standing in front of the table, her blade resting against the surface. Her posture was perfect, her gaze unwavering. She was a warrior to her core. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. Aaron could feel it, even without the tether. "I'm not broken, you know," Seraphiel said, her voice barely a whisper. Aaron stopped in his tracks, surprised by the vulnerability in her tone. He turned back to face her, his mind racing with questions. But there was no time. They had a mission to complete. "I know," he replied softly. She gave him a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Then let's finish this." Aaron didn't reply. He turned and walked out into the hall, where the rest of the angels were waiting. The storm outside had intensified, but it no longer mattered. The battle for the future had already begun. As they boarded the transport and took off, the sky above him swirling with unnatural energy. Aaron felt the weight of everything they had lost. But he also felt something else. Something new. Hope. A fragile hope that perhaps, in the end, they could save what was left. Perhaps, in the end, they could fix the world they had broken. The storm howled as the ship ascended, but Aaron knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough.